discover the mysterious African kingdom that controlled vast trade networks, melted gold and copper, and built a sophisticated civilization decades before Columbus ever set sail, yet somehow vanished from history books. When Portuguese explorer Diego Chao sailed up the Congo River in 1484, he expected to find another collection of scattered tribes. Instead, he encountered something that left European courts speechless: a sophisticated African kingdom with paved roads, a complex government system, and wealth that rivaled European powers. But here's what they don't teach you in school. This wasn't some recent development. The Kingdom of Kongo had been thriving for nearly a century before Columbus was even born. You've probably heard the narrative before, right? That Africa was just tribes and villages until Europeans arrived to bring civilization. That's the story they want you to believe. But what if I told you that while Europe was still emerging from the Dark Ages, there was an African kingdom so advanced that it had diplomatic relations with the Pope, issued its own currency, and controlled trade routes that stretched across an entire continent? By the end of this journey, you'll understand why the Kingdom of Kongo wasn't just advanced for its time, it was ahead of its time. The evidence is right there in the historical records, documented by Portuguese scribes who witnessed it firsthand. In 1390, that's 102 years before Columbus reached the Americas, a visionary leader named Lukini Lua Nimi founded what would become one of Africa's greatest kingdoms. Think about that timeline for a moment. When Europeans were still figuring out basic navigation, the Kingdom of Kongo was already establishing trade networks that would make modern corporations jealous. But here's where it gets mysterious. The founding of this kingdom wasn't just political. It was spiritual. According to oral traditions that have survived for over 600 years, two powerful clans came together through what they called a sacred marriage. Nimi and Zima of the Mpemba and Sokolao of Mbata didn't just unite their territories through conquest like most medieval kingdoms. They created an alliance based on mutual respect and shared vision. The descendants of Nimi would rule the kingdom, while those of Nsoku would govern the powerful province of Mbata. This wasn't just smart politics. It was revolutionary thinking that wouldn't be seen in Europe for centuries. By the time Portuguese explorers discovered the Kingdom of Kongo, it wasn't a small tribal territory. We're talking about an empire that stretched from modern-day Gabon in the north all the way down to the Kwanza River in Angola. Over 500 miles of controlled territory. From the Atlantic Ocean in the west to the Kongo River in the east, this kingdom controlled an area larger than many European nations of that time. But size isn't what made Kongo remarkable. It was what they built within those borders that should make you question every history textbook you've ever read. Picture this. While European cities were still dumping waste in the streets, the capital city of Sao Salvador, originally called Mbanza Kongo, was a planned metropolis with a sophisticated layout. The Portuguese who arrived there described wide boulevards, organized neighborhoods, and a central palace complex that rivaled anything they had seen in Europe. We're not talking about mud huts here. These were stone structures with intricate architectural designs that showed advanced engineering knowledge. The kingdom had developed its own system of provinces, each governed by appointed officials who reported directly to the Mana-Kongo, the king. But here's the part that's going to make you think. This wasn't just political organization. The Kingdom of Kongo had developed a complex bureaucracy with specialized roles, official ceremonies, and a legal system that governed everything from trade disputes to marriage contracts. They had created, essentially, a medieval African state that functioned with the efficiency of a modern government. And let's talk about their economy, because this is where the story gets really interesting. The Kingdom of Kongo wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. They had developed extensive mining operations for copper and gold, creating a metallurgical industry that produced both currency and trade goods. But they didn't stop there. The Congolese had mastered the art of smelting, creating copper ingots that served as a standardized currency system throughout the region. This wasn't primitive bartering, this was sophisticated economic planning. The kingdom's artisans were creating raffia cloth, so fine that Portuguese traders compared it to European silks. They were producing pottery that was not only functional but artistically sophisticated, with designs and techniques that showed centuries of refined craftsmanship. Their ironworking was so advanced that they were producing tools and weapons that impressed even the Portuguese, who were supposed to be the ones with superior technology. Here's something that should make every African descendant proud. The Kingdom of Kongo had established trade networks that connected the Atlantic coast to the interior of Africa. They were trading ivory, copper, raffia cloth, and other goods with kingdoms and tribes across the continent. This wasn't just local commerce. This was international trade on a scale that required complex logistics, diplomatic agreements, and economic planning. We're talking about a medieval African kingdom that had essentially created what we would recognize today as a sophisticated trade empire. But here's where the mystery deepens, and this is something you need to understand about African history. When the Portuguese arrived in 1484, they didn't conquer the Kingdom of Kongo. They negotiated with it. King Zinga and Kuwu, who took the Christian name João I, entered into diplomatic relations with Portugal as an equal, not as a subject, not as a conquered ruler, but as the leader of a sovereign nation. Think about what that means. In 1491, King João I of Congo was exchanging letters with the King of Portugal. African ambassadors were traveling to Lisbon and Rome. The Pope himself recognized the Kingdom of Kongo as a legitimate Christian state. This wasn't colonization. This was international diplomacy between equal powers. And here's something that's going to challenge your assumptions about Christianity in Africa. The Kingdom of Kongo's conversion to Christianity wasn't forced upon them by European colonizers. It was a strategic decision made by African leaders who saw the advantages of aligning with European powers while maintaining their independence. King Afonso I, who ruled from 1509 to 1542, became one of the most powerful Christian monarchs in the world, African or European. But, and this is crucial, they didn't just adopt European Christianity, they adapted it. Congolese Christianity blended traditional African spiritual practices with Catholic doctrine, creating something unique and powerful. The kingdom built churches, established schools, and even sent young nobles to study in Portugal and Rome. But they did this while maintaining their African identity, their traditional governance systems, and their economic independence. Now here's where the story takes a turn that explains why you've never heard about this incredible civilization. The Kingdom of Kongo's relationship with Portugal started as a partnership between equals, but European greed eventually corrupted that relationship. The Portuguese became increasingly interested in one particular Congolese export people. The Atlantic slave trade, which started as a limited exchange, gradually became the dominant force in Portuguese-Congolese relations. But here's what the history books won't tell you. The Kingdom of Kongo fought back. For over 180 years, Congolese kings protested, resisted, and actively fought against the slave trade. King Afonso I wrote passionate letters to the Portuguese king, documenting the devastation that slave raids were causing in his kingdom. These weren't the words of a primitive ruler. These were sophisticated diplomatic protests that showed deep understanding of international law and moral responsibility. The kingdom even went to war with Portugal multiple times to protect their people. In 1622, the First Congo-Portuguese War began when Portuguese forces launched what the Congolese considered unprovoked attacks on their territory. The Congolese army, equipped with both traditional weapons and firearms acquired through trade, held their own against Portuguese forces for decades. But the most remarkable part of this resistance story is the Battle of Mbuila in 1665. King Antonio I of Congo led his army against a combined Portuguese and Angolan force. Although the Congolese were ultimately defeated and King Antonio was killed, the battle represented something profound: an African kingdom fighting to the death to maintain its independence and protect its people from enslavement. Even after this defeat, the Kingdom of Kongo didn't disappear. It continued to exist, weakened but still functioning, for another 250 years. Different factions, the Kimpanzu and Kinloza, competed for control, but they maintained the kingdom's traditions, its government structure, and its identity as an independent African state. The Kingdom of Kongo proved that African civilizations were capable of everything that European civilizations achieved: complex government, sophisticated economics, international diplomacy, technological innovation, and military organization. They did this without European guidance, without European technology, and often despite European interference. So why don't we know about this? Why isn't the Kingdom of Kongo taught in schools alongside other great medieval kingdoms? The answer lies in how history gets written and who gets to tell the story. Colonial powers had every incentive to minimize or erase evidence of sophisticated African civilizations because it contradicted their justifications for conquest and enslavement. But the evidence is there. Portuguese documents from the 15th and 16th centuries describe the Kingdom of Kongo in detail. Congolese letters and diplomatic correspondence survive in European archives. Archaeological evidence continues to reveal the sophistication of Congolese society. The oral traditions of the Congolese people have preserved these stories for over 600 years. What we're looking at isn't just the story of one African kingdom. It's proof that Africa has always been home to advanced civilizations, sophisticated political systems, and innovative technologies. The Kingdom of Kongo challenges every stereotype about pre-colonial Africa and forces us to ask hard questions about whose stories get told and whose achievements get recognized. The Kingdom of Kongo lasted from 1390 to 1914, over 500 years of continuous existence as an independent African state. During that time, they survived European contact, resisted colonization, adapted to changing global circumstances, and maintained their cultural identity. When the kingdom finally ended, it wasn't because of conquest or collapse. It was because the scramble for Africa had carved up the continent among European powers who no longer recognized African sovereignty. But even then, the royal family of Kongo retained their traditions and their claim to legitimacy. As late as the 19th century, there were still recognized Congolese nobles who traced their lineage back to the original founders of the kingdom. Think about what this means for how we understand African history and African achievement. The Kingdom of Kongo wasn't an exception. It was one example of what was happening across Africa before European colonization. There were the kingdoms of Mali, Songhai, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, and dozens of others. Each had their own innovations, their own achievements, their own contributions to human civilization. The mystery of the Kingdom of Kongo isn't really about what they achieved. It's about why these achievements have been hidden from us. It's about understanding that African civilizations were developing advanced societies, complex technologies, and sophisticated governance systems long before European contact. And it's about recognizing that the narrative of Africa as a dark continent, waiting for European enlightenment, is not just wrong. It's a deliberate distortion designed to justify centuries of exploitation. When you understand the true story of the Kingdom of Kongo, you begin to see African history differently. You begin to understand that the ancestors of African Americans weren't taken from primitive tribes. They came from sophisticated civilizations with rich traditions, advanced knowledge, and complex social systems. The skills, intelligence, and resilience that enslaved Africans showed in the Americas weren't surprising developments. They were the continuation of traditions that had been developed over centuries in kingdoms like Congo. The Kingdom of Kongo proves that Africa has always been capable of greatness. It shows us that African leaders were making complex political decisions. African craftsmen were creating beautiful and functional art. African traders were building international networks, and African intellectuals were grappling with questions of governance, spirituality, and social organization centuries before European contact. It gives us a more complete picture of what was lost during the colonial period and what needs to be recovered and celebrated today. It shows us that the struggle for African independence and self-determination isn't something new. It's the continuation of a resistance that began over 500 years ago when Congolese kings first stood up to Portuguese slave traders. The mystery of the Kingdom of Kongo is really the mystery of hidden African greatness. It's the story of achievements that were deliberately obscured, contributions that were systematically ignored, and innovations that were attributed to others. But the truth has a way of surviving, even when powerful forces try to bury it. When Portuguese explorers first encountered the Kingdom of Kongo, they found a civilization that challenged their assumptions about Africa and Africans. Today, learning about the Kingdom of Kongo challenges our assumptions about what pre-colonial Africa was really like. It forces us to question the stories we've been told and seek out the truths that have been hidden from us. The Kingdom of Kongo wasn't just advanced for its time. It was a sophisticated civilization that contributed to the development of Central Africa, influenced international politics, and created innovations that benefited people across the continent. Its rulers were skilled diplomats, its artisans were master craftsmen, its traders were savvy businessmen, and its people were the inheritors of centuries of accumulated wisdom and knowledge. This is the heritage that belongs to every person of African descent. This is the legacy that survives despite centuries of attempts to erase it. This is the greatness that was always there, waiting for us to reclaim it and share it with the world. The Kingdom of Kongo proved that African civilizations could build, create, govern, and thrive without outside guidance. They proved that African peoples have always been capable of greatness. And they proved that the real mystery isn't how they achieved so much. It's why we've been kept from knowing about their achievements for so long. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned on African History.